On June 22, 1986, Diego Maradona wrote one of the most glorious pages in the history of football. In a quarter-final match at the Mexico World Cup against England, he scored what we now know as the goal of the century. But behind that magical play, there's a story of rivals, technique, and talent that deserves to be told. Today, we will explore who the rivals were that Maradona left behind. Diego receives the ball with his back to the English goal, which from that spot was barely visible. Beardsley was coming from the right as if to bother him during the reception. He witnesses Maradona's sudden turn. The Argentine moves towards the same side Beardsley was coming from, and with that movement, along with his trademark short sprint, the native of Hexham, Northumberland, is completely neutralized. Hexham is a town that doesn't reach 12,000 inhabitants. Diego Maradona was exactly 81 days old when Peter Andrew Beardsley came into this world on January 18, 1961. Being close to the city of Newcastle allowed Peter to start in the youth teams of Newcastle United. Like so many other great footballers, Peter was also let go. He played for the modest Carlisle United, where he debuted and played between 1979 and 1982. Then he went to Canada to play for Vancouver Whitecaps. He returned and joined Manchester United, no less. But there he only played one League Cup match and was cut again. He went back to the Whitecaps and was back in less than a year. Later, Newcastle paid £150,000 when they could have had him for free as a youth player, but Peter ended up justifying the investment, earning his place in the national team led by Bobby Robson through speed, instinct, and goals. And thus, after scoring the second goal in a 3-0 win against Paraguay in the round of 16, he crossed Diego's path, or at least he tried to. When Hector Enrique finds Maradona with a short pass, Peter Reid was glued to the referee. Reid, who came through the youth ranks of Bolton Wanderers, had turned 32 days before that match against Argentina. He had 225 matches for Bolton and a promotion to the old First Division in 1978. At the time of traveling to Mexico with the national team, he boasted a FA Cup 1984. The subsequent European Cup Winners' Cup 1985, and the First Division title 1984-85. All these with Everton from his hometown, where he had been playing for 4 years. When Diego takes the ball near the center circle, the first thing he does is move backward. For Reid thought he had him under control and firmly planted his right leg to stand in front of the Argentine and interrupt his backward movement. However, Diego spun on his axis and changed direction, already embarking on an unstoppable journey towards the goal. Reid reacted, but it was too late. Diego and the ball crossed the halfway line. Diego cut inside and accelerated again to neutralize Reid forever. Born on December 28, 1958, in Singapore, but back with his family in Lowestoft, Suffolk, Terry Butcher arrived at the '86 World Cup in bad shape. Not physically, rather mentally. A fan of Ipswich Town, young Terry had rejected an offer from Norwich. He fulfilled his own and his father's dream by becoming a professional at Ipswich. He debuted in 1976, the same year as Diego, won the FA Cup in 1978, secured the UEFA Cup in 1981, and stayed at the club until that fateful 1986 for him. After 271 matches for the club, Terry was relegated with Ipswich and left the club. Now let's return to the greatest play in World Cup history. The clumsy Terry comes out very badly positioned. His posture and body language gave Maradona all the information he needed. Basically, Butcher, his body, his legs, and the angle he chose to intercept Maradona were an irresistible invitation for Diego to cut inside. Butcher came out to prevent the Napoli player from going down the right and got a colossal snub in return. Immediately, Butcher turned and began to chase him. Diego was already at the edge of the box. Waiting for him there, also poorly positioned, was his namesake, Terry Fenwick. Before being rudely dismissed by Diego, Fenwick had some happy moments in his football career. Terence William Fenwick was born in Seaham, a coastal town almost 10 kilometers south of Sunderland. He started at Crystal Palace, where he debuted in 1976. In 1980, he changed clubs but not cities. He signed for Queen's Park Rangers. In 1982, Fenwick became the first defender to score a goal in an FA Cup final with the ball in play not from a penalty or free kick. It was a precise header that earned QPR a draw at Wembley against Tottenham Hotspur and the right to a replay. Diego's left foot was still carrying the ball forward when the most famous and helpless victim of all those he took down in his career appeared. Born in Leicester in 1949, Peter Shilton joined the youth ranks of the city's namesake team in 1963 when Maradona was just 3 years old. At Leicester, while Shilton was learning his trade in the youth teams, the legendary English national team goalkeeper Gordon Banks was playing. Yes, the one known for the so-called best save in World Cup history when in 1970 he did the impossible by diverting a sure header from Pell. Banks was full of praise for Peter Shilton and strongly recommended him to the club's directors. As a reward, the goalkeeper considered the best in the country, who had just won the '66 World Cup with England, was put up for sale by Leicester because the young Shilton conditioned the club. How? He told them he wouldn't sign his professional contract unless they guaranteed him the starting goalkeeper position. Banks was sold to Stoke City, and Shilton took over the Leicester goals, making his debut at age 16, overshadowed by Ray Clemence in the fight for the gloves in the English national team. Shilton even resigned from the national team in 1976, but regretted it 3 months later. In 1977, Peter Shilton signed for Nottingham Forest, and with him in goal came all these titles. First Division 1977-78, Charity Shield 1978, League Cup 1979, and above all, the double European Cup in 1979 and 1980, and the 1980 European Super Cup. Shilton moved to Southampton in 1982 and arrived at Mexico '86 representing that club as captain of his national team and at 36 years old. He seemed tired when he couldn't get much off the ground to prevent the famous hand of God, and even more so when Diego decided to perform that feint outside. It was the end. Terry Butcher could do nothing either. It was too late when he tried to tackle from behind. The goal of the century was not just a spectacular play. It was a message to the world, a declaration of Diego Maradona's genius, and a moment that encapsulates the beauty of football. More than 3 decades later, we are still marveling at his skill in beating all his opponents and finishing with precision in front of the goal. If this video gets a lot of support, we will prepare a part to where we explore what happened to the players who faced Maradona that day after the World Cup. Leave your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that marked this sport.